What if I told you there was a day when an African army, armed with faith, unity, and strategy, shattered the illusion of European invincibility? A day when the empire's iron confidence cracked under the mountain sun of Ethiopia. A day when Africa said no, and the world could never look at her the same way again. This isn't a story of submission, it's a story of defiance, of courage born in the highlands, of a king who refused to kneel before an empire. This is the story of Adwa. March 1st, 1896, the day that redefined what was possible for a colonized world, when Emperor Menelik II and his Empress Taitu Betul led a nation not just to victory, but to immortality. While European powers met in Berlin to divide Africa like pieces of a map, one ancient kingdom dared to resist. Ethiopia, a land whose kings traced their lineage to Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, had watched as empires fell across the continent. The Zulu, the Ashanti, the Sokoto Caliphate, each crushed under the weight of modern rifles and the cold logic of conquest. Yet here, in the mountains above Adwa, history took a different turn, because for the first time in the modern era, the colonizer would lose. The empire that would not bow. By the late 1800s, the European scramble for Africa was nearly complete. Lines were drawn in distant cities, slicing through kingdoms, rivers, and ancient lands. France, Britain, Germany, Belgium, all had taken their share. All but one land remained unbroken: Ethiopia, the land of black faces and burning pride. For centuries, it had resisted invaders, Ottoman, Egyptian, even Mahdist. It was not a colony. It was a civilization, and it had no intention of becoming anyone's protectorate. When the Italian government drafted the Treaty of Wuchali in 1889, they thought they'd found their opening. To the Italians, it said Ethiopia was now under their protection. To Menelik, it said something very different: friendship between equals. Two languages, two meanings, one betrayal. When Menelik discovered the deceit, his fury echoed through the highlands. He tore the treaty apart. He declared to the world, "Ethiopia has need of no one. She stretches her hands unto God." And from that moment, war was inevitable.
But Ethiopia was not Algeria. It was not the Congo. It was not a land waiting to be taken. Baratieri's maps were wrong. His scouts were blind. His enemies were not tribesmen. They were soldiers, disciplined, organized, and fighting for their home. The empress who outwitted an empire. While Menelik planned his strategy, another mind was at work: his wife, Empress Taitu Betul. Taitu was no passive queen. She was a diplomat, a strategist, and a spy master. It was she who exposed Italian bribes and plots. She who secured arms from foreign dealers. And she who proposed cutting off the Italians' water supplies during their advance, a tactic that would break their strength before a single shot was fired. Menelik may have been the emperor of Ethiopia, but Taitu was the brains of resistance. Together, they were unstoppable. The land that fought back. The Italian army advanced into a world they did not understand. The Ethiopian highlands are not gentle country. steep ridges, hidden valleys, and roads that vanish into stone. Every ravine was a trap, every hill a fortress. Local villagers carried water and food to Menelik's soldiers. Scouts watched the enemy's every move. Messengers traveled the mountain paths by night, whispering of Italian weakness. Menelik didn't need to chase the enemy. He waited, patient as stone, for them to come to him. The eve of destruction. On the night of February 29, 1896, the Italian camp was restless. Supplies were running low. Morale was fraying. Baratieri's officers urged him to attack before the Ethiopians grew stronger. Reluctantly, he agreed. Before dawn, 3 Italian columns began moving through the darkness, each unaware they were walking into a storm. The maps said the ground was open, but in the shifting light of the highlands, nothing was as it seemed. Paths split into dead ends. Mountains appeared where valleys were marked. Units became lost, separated, exposed. And as the first rays of sun struck the peaks of Adwa, the Ethiopians struck. The fire of Adwa. The air exploded with the crack of rifles and the thunder of cannons. Drums beat like the heart of the earth. Priests held aloft the tabot, the sacred symbol of the Ark of the Covenant, as they blessed the warriors. Menelik's generals had planned every move. Ras Alula, the Lion of the North, led his men down from the ridges in a perfect ambush. Ras Mikhail and Ras Mangasha cut off Italian reinforcements. And from the west, Empress Taitu's forces rained artillery on the invaders below. What followed was chaos, but not confusion. The Ethiopians fought with coordination and purpose, driving the Italians into the valleys where numbers no longer mattered. Baratieri's soldiers fired volley after volley, but for every Ethiopian who fell, 10 more rose. By midday, the Italian columns were shattered. General Dabermida lay dead. General Albertone's men were annihilated. Even the proud Eritrean Askari, forced to fight for their colonizers, dropped their weapons and fled. Menelik rode forward, his white horse gleaming in the sunlight. He raised his sword and shouted, "Forward for Ethiopia and for God!" What came next was not a battle, it was a reckoning.
The empire broken. By afternoon, the Italian army had ceased to exist. Thousands lay dead or captured. Artillery, rifles, and supplies fell into Ethiopian hands. Baratieri himself barely escaped the slaughter. The defeat was total, the kind that erases illusions. Europe could no longer pretend. The myth of white invincibility broken in the dust of Adwa. The echo across continents. When news of the victory reached Europe, it caused shock, disbelief, even denial. How could a black nation defeat a European power? How could uncivilized Africans outthink and outfight a modern army? In Paris, newspapers called it the greatest disaster in colonial history. In London, officials worried that Adwa would inspire rebellion across the continent. In Rome, riots broke out. The Italian prime minister resigned in disgrace. But in Africa, in Africa, Adwa was a spark that ignited hope. From Sudan to Senegal, from Kenya to the Caribbean, men and women whispered the name of Menelik. Freedom fighters saw Ethiopia as proof that liberation was possible. The tricolor flag, green, yellow, and red, became the symbol of African unity. And for generations to come, it would fly again in Ghana, in Jamaica, in the Rastafarian movement, in the hearts of all who dreamed of a free Africa. The legacy of Menelik II. Menelik did not march on Italy. He did not seek revenge. Instead, he sent a message to the world. We do not desire to be enemies of any nation, but we will be no one's slaves. He secured international recognition of Ethiopian sovereignty. He opened embassies, modernized his capital, built railways and schools, proving that Ethiopia could be both ancient and modern, both proud and progressive. His victory at Adwa was not just military, it was psychological. It shattered centuries of racist ideology that claimed Africans were destined to be ruled. It declared that intelligence, courage, and unity were not the property of Europe. They were universal. The message for our age. More than a century has passed since that day in 1896, but Adwa is not over. Its echo still rolls through time, through revolutions, independence struggles, and the voices of people who refuse to be silenced. Because Adwa is not just a battle, it's a reminder that no empire is invincible, that freedom is never given, only taken, that unity can turn mountains into shields, and that the human spirit, when cornered, will always fight to be free. So the next time someone tells you history belongs to conquerors, remember the mountains of Ethiopia, remember Menelik, remember Taitu, remember the warriors who stood with rifles and faith and faced the greatest powers on earth and won. Adwa is not just Ethiopia's victory, it is Africa's declaration. It is humanity's proof that courage can rewrite destiny. And if that spirit could rise once, it can rise again.